Hi, it's Mike Stevenson here. In this video today, I wanted to talk a little bit about the concept of a plug-and-play integration platform, which we'd implement with Azure Integration Services. The reason I think this is important and what I want to illustrate in this short talk is when we're building integration solutions, rather than just thinking about the point-to-point immediate integration requirement, if we put some thinking into how we might introduce extensibility points into our integration solution, that means when new feature requirements come along, it can be easier to basically plug on new integrations to solve those problems quicker. That leads to the use of an agile approach, which I think will help deliver business value quicker. It'll lower the risk of impacts on your integration platform of changes, breaking other stuff. So I want to take a look at a project to see how we did this recently. So this is a relatively complicated looking integration first off, but I just want to talk a little bit about what's going on here. So we have success factors over here. Yeah. So we've got success factors over here implemented as our new HR system. We've got things like new joiners come into the company, they get registered in HR in success factors, they go through the onboarding process. Then once they're an employee of the company, if there's any changes made, so say there's a name change, some kind of status or job change, there's loads of other systems across the company that need to be told about these changes. Now, if you think of that whole identity life cycle and sort of person integration type scenario, this exists in every company really. And for years in the Microsoft stack, there's been a number of different ways you'd solve this problem, ranging from technologies like Identity Lifecycle Manager to database integration, BizTalk integration, and all sorts of other custom stuff. So one of the things that we have here is in success factors, we've got our scope around the success factors product and technologies that come with that. One of the things that we did as our success factor partner was publishing events to an integration interface we implemented with API management. So this tells us about people changing and also about new joiners joining the company. I'm just going to shrink my pen down a little bit more again. So we can use these events. So if we say we've got new hire, update, and you might have somebody leaves. So these events come into our receiver implemented with API management and with the Logic app. And what we were doing is, first off, for the events that come in, we save them to our data platform. So that's a combination of a data lake and Synapse Analytics, which is part of the tech stack in our data platform. So we're recording these events and the current state of a person when we receive an event update. So after we receive that event, we're then publishing a message to Service Bus, and that's the first thing where we like extensibility points. So this messaging architecture means we can implement a publish subscribe pattern, so we can listen for things like the new hire events, the leave events, and the update events. So in this scenario, we're going to walk through the new hire process. So when we get a new hire event, this kicks off this new hire integration, which would integrate into Active Directory, and that would create a new user. Now, you do get some things with success factors that can handle this component up here where it's like an Azure AD write back. Now, one of the things that you can do with that is you can have it sync users between Azure AD in the cloud and success factors over here, so it can do sync when users change and stuff like that, but it's not going to handle all of the other applications that are involved, and there's also a bunch of constraints and challenges that you need to figure out how to solve. So we used that for some things, but we found that it was really difficult to meet the business process requirements using that for more than what we did. So what we did is we create a new user here into Active Directory. Most companies will have Azure AD Connect or Entra. I don't know if this particular bit's been renamed yet. So I guess that's called Entra. This should be called Entra, and maybe this is as well. I don't know. But I assume their components are all going down that journey anyway. But the Azure AD Connect component will sync that new user and Active Directory into the cloud. That means they become available for our SaaS applications. So things like, we've got Office 365, we've got CRM. These just all drive off the back of that. And you also have other integrations that can be driven by the change feeds. So I don't know that we've actually got any of these off the top of my head, but I think it's SCIM. And then some SaaS applications can integrate in there. But again, that's particular types of applications tend to be SaaS apps. Some of your server-based applications probably won't use that approach. Now, so as I say, we've got this write back. So when the new user's created, the write back component would kick in, and that would basically link the employee to an Active Directory user. So we'd get things like the email and a bunch of other stuff. And what we also did though was after we created the user in Active Directory, there was also a bunch of other requirements. So we had this interface that would have a list of default groups people would get added to, and that would integrate into Active Directory. And we had this activate mailbox, which would use a PowerShell runbook to activate on Exchange the mailbox. Now, this is really just the aim of this slide is just to show the kind of the picture of what we were implementing, certainly from a new hire perspective. Now, there's a couple of things here. So in a technology platform that you're building, we often would talk about the target architecture, but the reality is very rarely in the business does the target stay static. So while we might have a vision of a target architecture, the reality is that it's always a moving target. So you need an architecture that can change, transition, new things get added to it, things get replaced and decommissioned. So when we build an integration platform, we need to be able to handle that kind of change to make our lives easy. So one of the examples of what happened was actually, sorry, before I jump onto one of the changes, one of the things that also happened is after that write back, so let's say we've got AD here, that write back's happening into success factors, and that would trigger the person update. That would fire a new event in, we'd update the data lake, we'd pub sub to all these different apps that would integrate in. So we'd have things like the training system, the help desk system, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Would all sort of once the employee was kind of onboarded, all the other systems would get their updates once they reached the point in the employee life cycle that they needed to be in other systems. And that's kind of how we then keep them up to sync with any changes. Now, what happened was we found a problem in the business process. So if we go back here, we think this is about the new hire. The person syncs back into success factors. But one of the constraints in the implementation on success factors was we wouldn't get these person updates coming out until they were onboarded. So basically, so before your start date, the events wouldn't come out of success factors because you aren't in the employee central module. You were still like a sort of prospective hire in the onboarding process. Now that was fine for most cases. The bit where we had a problem was on the help desk applications. So what happened here was that the onboarding process for a new employee would require things like you need a laptop to be ordered, you'd need a phone to be ordered, you'd need to be a few other things to happen. But because your user doesn't exist in the help desk system yet, you can't sort of provision those things. So that was one of the problems we had, where success factors not sending the person updates until the day you start means we couldn't prepare all those things ready for your first day. So we had a challenge here from our architecture about how do we actually handle that scenario. Now, bear in mind, we have built an interface to do upserts into the help desk once we start getting the person update events. The challenge was just that the person update event doesn't happen until too late for when we want to do these onboarding activities. So this is where our plug and play architecture comes in. So if we go back to the new hire screen, so we've got these new hire events coming in, and the key bit is that we're hitting service bus on these interfaces. So you see here we had the new hire gets created in Active Directory. We then publish this message to say we've got a new user, trigger the creation of groups, trigger the creation of the mailbox. And I guess actually that line is slightly wrong. It should really be like that. So what we could also do was we could take the event after the creation of the Active Directory user, and we could use that to drive the upsert into the help desk system, just the same as what the person update would do. So really what we're saying here is the key point is every time we hit service bus, if we publish a message to a topic, that allows us to create a new extensibility point where we can plug something else onto the architecture. So if you remember, the service bus, you've obviously got the typical sort of send a message, somebody receives it, is the simple concept. But with pub sub, you can have you send to a topic, but then you can have that route on service bus with subscriptions to multiple queues. So we have R1 and R2. And really what we're saying here is just by adding a new subscriber here, we can reuse that message that's been published, subscribe a new interface to it, and plug on a new bit to the architecture without having. So we didn't really have to change all this stuff over here, didn't change success factors, none of this changes. We just plugged this bit here, and we solved the problem that we had because our business process was slightly different than what we thought it was going to be. Now, hopefully that shows a good example of a service bus based plug and play piece, but we also had other requirements that came up later on. Especially when we're doing agile projects, you don't always know everything up front. If you did a waterfall style approach, you would often be doing a lot more detailed low level analysis on everything you might possibly want to build. And that has pros and cons, but when you're doing a more agile approach, you don't know low-level detail of everything up front. So that's where these agility driven from these extensibility points really comes into play. So here we had a new requirement where we needed to deliver a batch of data to a third-party vendor. So, maybe they once a week need a list of all of our users to manage access to the gym or to some benefit that we might have. Now, if you remember what we're doing in the architecture, this bit here already existed from the person updates and the new hires, where we had people coming through this receiver, and then we're building up a history in the data platform by saving things to the data lake. So what we're able to do at this point, without having to change all the rest of the architecture, we can just build a new query in Synapse, and we can execute that query from a logic app with the SQL connector. So we can build a new interface over here where the logic app runs this query, gets a batch of all the person data. We can use an Azure function to transform the data, and then we just deliver it to that third party. And then what we found is that over time, more of these requirements would come into play for different types of data from the same the same data we were collecting in data platforms. So we could just build more of these, do a query in Synapse. You can, because they were ad hoc, not really run very often, it worked quite well to be able to do a serverless SQL query of the data, just direct in the data lake. And we could just plug on more of these interfaces where it executes a query against Synapse and delivers a batch file to a third party. Okay, so if we now think about, at this point we've talked about service bus and we've talked about the data lake being bits where we can plug on new interfaces to reuse what we've built. One of the other things I think you'll quite often find as a good extensibility point is going to be event grid. So here's a picture from a talk I'll be doing coming up in a few weeks' time about EDI processing with Azure Integration Services and BizTalk. And here we've got Edifact messages coming in through APIM into Logic Apps. They get transformed and they get saved to a storage account. So this could be your data lake, for example, implemented with Azure Storage. And you can create a system topic that'll fire an event based on files getting created in the data lake or files getting updated. You can then plug on logic apps that listen to these events with an event grid topic subscription, and you can fire a logic app that might then, it'll query back, get the blob from storage. You might transform it with an integration account and then make an API call to a line of business system. So that, again, it's the same concept. It's just the implementation slightly different. Instead of pub sub messaging, this time we're using an event from something like a storage account, but you could use different types of events. Event grid supports lots of different types of events from different Azure resources, or you could even do your own custom event if you wanted. And that's how you can add an extensibility point here to build from that one inbound interface. We could build multiple other interfaces here that would just drive from the topic and send to different systems. And again, plug and play interfaces. So hopefully this is interesting to people to listen to. I'd wanted to just share some thinking from some real world projects where we'd implemented these kinds of solutions. And this is how I think you can build Azure Integration Services solutions to get the maximum value from the implementation that you do. Thanks very much for listening. Hope everybody's having a great time. Cheers.